Hello and welcome back to Widowed AF. You're here with your host, Rosie Gilmoss, and my special guest today is Tash. Hello, Tash, and welcome from South East London.
Hello, everybody listening.
So, Tash and I actually met back in, we've had a chat off air, we think it was about 2013, and we both trained to be water babies teachers. And we spent a week in a swimming pool together. And I say this literally. We were in the pool for, I think, 10 hours a day for 7 days. It was quite horrific. And probably only pales into insignificance. Now we're widowed. And I will never forget really getting a text from you because we stayed in touch. And I got a text and it was not long after Ben had died and telling me that Rob, your husband, he wasn't your husband at the time, was he? Because you got married in the hospice. Is that right?
We got married just before he died. So he died in October and we got married in September. So he wasn't a husband at that time.
But he was your partner and the father, Marley, your son. And I just remember getting this text saying, he's got cancer and it doesn't look like he's going to make it. And I just remember that, kind of the blood draining from it because you were the first other person in my sort of social circle, I guess, who this happened to. And the result of which was that we kind of supported each other, didn't we? We were able to be a bit of a lifeline, and our sons are very close friends and we try and meet up when we can. So this is a different one today because I do know Tash personally. She's a good friend of mine. So who knows how the emotions are going to fall on this one. But I'm going to stop talking now, actually, and let Tash tell your story, if you don't mind.
Well, first thing says, me and Rob met back when I was 17, so years and years ago.
No, I didn't know that, actually.
Yeah, long time before Marley. And we were together for 3 years, I think. And then we split up. We both went our completely separate ways. He joined the Navy, or went back into the Navy. He got married, had 3 kids. And then we randomly got back in touch and got back together. He was still in the Navy at the time, so we spent lots of time apart. He went to Afghanistan 3 times, I think it was, in the end, and then decided to leave. This was again still before Marley was born. Came back with a lot of issues, let's put it like that. PTSD was diagnosed, but all that was down to me. That was me realising that something was seriously wrong and he really needed to get some help. He had a lot of anger issues and it was basically a red mist come down and the world was against him and I was always against, it was all my fault, apparently. So then, so that was diagnosed. Then we had Marley, and according to him, Marley kind of saved his life, got him back on track. The relationship still wasn't perfect, and nobody's relationship's perfect, no. I'm not going to lie, but there were still issues, let's put it like that. And, and then we split up. I think in 2017, I think, we split up for 6 months. He just said he'd had enough, blah, blah, blah. I think the PTSD was still a massive, massive problem.
Yeah, it has such a huge impact on, so much of your entire personality and mental health. It's huge, isn't it, this sort of PTSD?
Yeah. And I'm not saying I was perfect in any way in that relationship, and I'm not pretending that it was all him. It was all one way. We weren't a great fit, let's put it like that. But, we had Marley. You kind of want to stay together. I know it's not what you should do, but you work at things because you think you want it to work.
Yeah.
And then we got back together. My dad was diagnosed with cancer in 2017, or did he get the all clear? I can't remember. He had esophageal cancer first. He smoked all his life, drinks. He had chemo, radiotherapy, 2/3 of his stomach removed, and he's fine. Absolutely came through it. He got the all clear. He's been now written off from St Thomas's, although he is in there today, but for something else. And he got the all clear. And then about 3 months later, Rob had back pain, which we've all had back pain.
Yeah.
And we had to go to A&E, and they did a scan, and I never forget them bringing out this. The doctor drew a picture of what they'd found, and it was, we both looked at it and I was like, that's cancer. That's what my dad had. That's what the drawing they gave my dad.
Oh, goodness.
And it was like, well, this is all happening again. This is a bit weird. This is not nice.
An understatement.
Yeah. And it was a very quick succession of hospital appointment, and he went in for a endoscopy on the day before I ran the first London Marathon.
I like that you like to get in a marathon run as well there, Tash.
No, I've retired from international sport now, so I'm not going to be running anymore.
Retired from international sport.
So the day before I ran the marathon, we were in Lewisham Hospital. He was having an endoscopy, and when we came out, the nurse kind of looked and said, "You'll get an appointment soon."
Oh.
And it's like, right, we kind of know now. It was so obvious to me. To him, I think he was in a bit of denial, but I guess that's a natural reaction for some people. So I did the marathon the following day, not feeling great, to be fair. And so that was it the 26th of April, or around that date, 2019. And yeah, so April, by the October, he died. So it was a very, very quick process. And they did, he had chemotherapy. That was horrific, the first one, because he had an allergic reaction to it and went into some kind of weird, horrible spasm fit.
Oh my goodness.
Thing in the chemo ward. So that was horrible. And he spent most of that summer at Guy's Hospital trying to get all the pain under control. I think by then it had spread to his bones. It had just run riot. I remember a surgeon saying, or a doctor saying, they're chasing something that they can't get hold of, basically. And yeah, then he came home for a while after Guy's, but the pain medication just wasn't enough, and he was asleep most of the time. He was on fentanyl. I mean, I could have run a drugs factory out of the house, to be fair. And in the end, I thought, no, I can't do this. I don't want Marley to see that. He was 7 at the time. I don't want to let him see his dad die in his house. And whether that was seen as a selfish thing, I don't know. There was quite a big issue with Rob's family, who wanted me to get carers in, etc., and I refused and said, no, he can go to the hospice. I don't want Marley to see this. It's not fair. He was asleep most of the day. If he wasn't asleep, he was in pain. And it was horrific. I'm not going to sugarcoat it in any way. It was horrific. And then we got married in September, actually. Although I don't call it, I still don't class it getting married, because it was kind of for the right reasons, but the wrong reasons.
Yeah. Yeah, this is to protect Marley, presumably.
Basically, yeah, that's what it was for. His family turned up wearing black, so that nice.
Wow.
Yeah, that was brilliant, that one. And there were a lot of problems during that summer with his family, and I think they took offence. I don't know what they took offence to, and even to this day, I don't know what they took offence to. I mean, it made things very, very difficult for me. And the week after we got married, they decided to take him on a canal boat trip. No, a boating holiday in Norfolk.
What, Rob?
Yeah.
From the hospice?
He wasn't in the hospice, but he couldn't walk. He could barely hold a conversation. He was on extreme pain medication, but they thought it was okay to take him on a boating holiday in Norfolk.
Jesus Christ.
I obviously objected to this and said, I don't think this is going to be a good thing for him. He's going to be in pain. He can't even sleep in a hospital bed without being in pain. But they did it anyway. And 24 hours later, I got a phone call saying, can you come and get him? It's not worked. And there was, in my head, I was so smug. And I know that sounds... I was like, I told you so. I told you this wasn't going to work. And I think it was a couple of days later he was in the hospice because it was too much. It was too much to cope with. And anyone who's seen or dealt with anyone with cancer, you know that it's hard work.
You talk about questioning your choice of whether it was the right thing to do to move him to a hospice or not. And I've just written down the words, Marley was 7. Like, that's all I've written down here, because to subject a 7-year-old to this is a very difficult choice to make. And you know, some people do it. I think it depends very much on the nature of the person who is suffering and how present they are, because you know, as you say, Rob was asleep the whole time. And I talked to somebody yesterday whose husband had quite severe brain injuries, and so he was completely he couldn't recognise the children, so she made the decision not to take them even prior to his death because it would have been so damaging. So I do think actually what you actually showed is a huge consideration for your child, and in that moment to protect Marley was your absolute priority above anybody else.
Yeah, that's true. And I made a decision very early on. I think Rob was in denial through a lot of this, even when he was, you know, with it and able to make decisions. He was in denial that he wasn't going to die and he'd be here forever. And it was obvious it wasn't going to happen. He was declining so quickly. And I made a choice very early on that if Marley asked, I would tell him the truth. I wasn't going to lie to him. I wasn't going to sugarcoat it, because it'll come back on, in my head, it'd bite me on the arse and I'd be a liar. I hate one thing I really, really hate. And one day Marley did say, Daddy gonna die of cancer. And I just looked at him and I said, yeah, I'm really sorry, Marley, but he is. I don't know when. We don't know when it's going to happen, but he is going to die. And I'm really sorry about that. And he dealt with it really, really well. Yes, he got upset, but he almost dealt with it in a more of a grown-up way than a lot of grown-ups deal with things. And I think kids are quite more resilient than we give them credit for.
They are, and we talk a lot about the importance of clear, age-appropriate language and honesty. And I guess by saying to him, you know, he asked you a question. You know, your only other alternative was to lie, and I'm like, I can't lie. So it's that, okay, I have to tell you the truth. But in doing so, you were able to prepare him for what was going to happen instead of kind of hiding it, you know, hushed whispers in closed rooms. That's very, very frightening for a child. And I think absolutely openness and honesty is how they recover or process this enormity, because, you know, and we say it all the time, but it is one of the worst things that can happen to a child. And it's really how we pick up the pieces afterwards. It determines how well they'll survive it, I guess.
Yeah, and I think even when he was in hospice at the end, Marley started to come with me, and then it was horrible. I mean, his dad was wearing nappies. It wasn't a nice sight. And Marley said to me, I don't want to go again. And I said, sure you don't want to go? He said, no, he doesn't know who I am. I can't talk to him. I don't want to go. And I supported him. You know, I wasn't going to drag him kicking and screaming into a place where you've just got, I know this is very blunt, but there's lots of death and sadness, and for a 7-year-old to be taken in when he doesn't want to go, I thought, no, he's made that decision now. I'm going to stick by him with that.
When you respected his decision, which means that you gave him a voice and some autonomy in a situation where he's completely out of control, because it's out of all of your control. You know, hearing you talk about Rob and the denial, I don't know whether it's being in the military, but, you know, you've sort of, they're kind of prepared for death, but death in war. They're not prepared for death of an illness that can take a young, healthy, fit human being. And I do think this kind of denial kicks in, and not me, surely not. And I suppose by giving Marley just a little bit of kind of autonomy, is the word again here, is very important.
Yeah, and I think even now, there are days when he still gets upset. I'm not going to pretend. And there are some, especially if he's overly tired and he's crying about moaning about something else, it'll kick in. Usually at bedtime, to be fair, it's usually at bedtime. But he still talks about him. I don't generally talk about him because I don't want to, but that's another part of this story.
Well, I was going to ask if you were going to sort of delve into this, and I completely understand if you don't want to, but it's, this is your kind of opportunity if you want to talk about it.
No, I think, I mean, it was funny when I was at your house recently. You introduced me to one of your friends as the person who hates her dead husband. And I just laughed because, and the shock on your friend's face. And because I'm like I've said, I'm not going to show that. I don't like him. I don't like what, I became, and we were splitting up or that kind of stuff. And then his family just making me feel worse during the whole cancer process. And then after he died, an innocent thing as setting up a PlayStation account, because it was all linked to him. All the emails were linked to him. And Marley wanted to, I don't know, get a game. And it was a case of, right, we have to dig through his emails and stuff to find all this. And I had to turn his phone on, and I found things that he obviously never wanted me to find. I remember turning, and I know this is awful. Once you start looking, you're like, well, I'm gonna see what else I can find on here.
You need to know it all then, don't you?
Yeah, and there's still a folder on there I can't get into. There was emails of him paying some Eastern European woman some money that I couldn't get my head around because he had never had any money. And text messages from other people, and someone who he worked with actually went to the hospital when he was at Guy's and met his mum. And
wow,
like, what? Like, the anger.
Oh my goodness.
It was awful. It was absolutely awful. And I'm standing in the room holding this phone, physically shaking, thinking, and I really apologise for the language, you fucking bastard.
Yeah, don't apologise for language.
And it made sense. There were, times I look back on now and go, well, I was right. You were hiding your phone from me. You made me think it was me and I was being paranoid and, but it wasn't. I was right the whole way along. And so I don't have any love left there. And I know that sounds horrible, and I know some people are going to find that, I don't know, offended by that, but I don't.
I disagree. I think actually you had, it was obviously quite a turbulent relationship anyway, but you've kind of buckled in and cared for him and, done through every step of the way, what you felt was best for you, him and Marley. And then to go through and find out that, it's giving me kind of similarities to Lulu's situation, to find out that the person that you shared a bed with, a home with, a child with, was living a completely secret life, humiliating you. I mean, this is what I'm hearing is kind of the humiliation and all this anger and nowhere to direct it because he's not here. Like, who do you rail at? Who do you shout at? Who do you get answers from? And that's almost, I guess it's another piece of control being stripped from you because you've been handed this bombshell of information and you have nowhere to direct it. I mean, did you contact any of the women or anything like this?
No, I did what I had to do with the phone, shut it down. It's in a drawer somewhere. And I just thought, you know what? At the time, I was like, I can't do anything with this information. What's the point? He's dead now. Get over it, move along. But there is still that anger here. And I do, there is that, why aren't you here so I can face you and go, you absolute shitpot? That's polite. I mean, I am big.
I like that term.
But you put me through all of that. After we split up, we had a counselling session and he basically blamed me for everything. And I'm thinking, actually, now I know what I know. You shit. Absolute shit. And it was, I did, care for him all that through his cancer, and was up and down to Guy's Hospital, and was trying to get on with his family who thought the sunshines out of his arse, and they still did. And my God, if they found out any of this, and there is part of me that thinks, do you know what? I'll send them this. I won't, but and just the sun didn't shine out of his arse. You thought he was this most amazing person. And I know we think that of our family. I'm not going to pretend, but he wasn't the, loveliest person in the world that they thought he was. But but the anger there is that anger. Like, you're right, the anger is still there.
Because it's got nowhere to go, has it?
No.
I'm not particularly confrontational. I find it very difficult to confront people about things like this. But I also know that, a gross word, but closure, because you could at least have, thrown a potato at his head or something, couldn't you, right?
Yeah. It'd be more than a potato, I have to say.
I didn't want to incite violence. So just talk to me a little bit about how that impacts how you are able to talk to Marley about his dad, because obviously you don't want to completely cloud his judgment of his dad, but also you've been very hurt, and I guess at some point you would want Marley to understand the kind of the intricacies of what went on in, not age appropriate detail as usual, but just sort of wondering how you manage that situation.
I bite my tongue quite a lot. There are times when, all kids, they lie a little bit sometimes. We all know that. We all pretend they don't, but they do. The amount of times I've said, don't become a liar like your dad. Now, I've never said it, but Marley's personality is quite similar to his dad's sometimes. And if we're having an argument about something, we both dig our heels in. And there are times when I almost, oh my God, you're so like your fucking dad.
Yeah.
But I can't because that's not fair. That's just where my anger is, I think, sometimes. And maybe in the future I will, say, look, your dad wasn't, an angel. But then he was only around till he was 7. I don't want to.
No, you sort of maybe want to let him keep hold of this.
And there are still photos up. Not of the 2 of us. There's photos of the 3 of us, I think. That I really want to take down. I don't want them in my house, but for his sake, I don't suddenly want to take things off the wall, because that's not fair. I don't want him saying, well, why have you taken that picture of Daddy down? I was like, well, I don't really want him staring at me off.
But this is, again, it's once again, it's you putting your kind of your pain and your hurt and your resentment to one side to shield Marley and to give him, this kind of positive memory of his dad, which means that he can take that through life with him instead of carrying an anger, because especially as he grows older and, you've loved him and been his kind of main person, he's going to feel very protective of you. So finding this out, I guess, could, cause some anger towards his dad. But, who knows how they're going to...
Yeah.
Right. What about therapy and things? Have you been able to access stuff like that to sort of help with the anger and to help Marley process his grief?
He had counselling through the school. The school, absolutely brilliant. He had that, and then they said he's fine if he ever wants to come back. I think he had about terms worth, and then they said, look, we think he's fine, but if he wants to drop in, they always know that the counsellor's there, that if he wants to go or if he wants a quiet space to go.
Yeah.
I had one session at the hospice, and I ranted at her pretty much, and then came out and was like, yeah, I've just basically ranted at this poor woman and left. I've never had therapy since. I've never had counselling since.
So what would you say, how do you cope? What do you use what are your coping strategies? And again, you don't have to tell me.
No. I think sometimes a glass of wine or a few is always a helpful thing. Probably not the best thing to do.
We've been there, mate.
And I think during the whole process, I learned to just get on with it. And I know that sounds like such an old-fashioned way of dealing with it, but I had a 7-year-old that I had to take backwards and forward to school. I had, a house to look after, being a dog to walk. I had, I needed to carry on as normal, because otherwise I think I would have gone mental. And so I have just got on with it.
And you were still working for Water Babies at the time, weren't you?
Yes, I was. I did. Yeah, I was actually working for Water Babies at the time, yeah.
So for anybody that's not done this baby swimming class, they're very good. We both of them with our own children, and but the instructors will have to do quite a lot of singing, and there's a particular song that kind of will stick in your head for decades, and it's splish splash. So I won't do it because I'm tone deaf. I've just got these images of you sort of freshly bereaved in a swimming pool singing Splish Splash to a load of mums and babies. And I was actually on maternity leave from the same job, and I didn't go back. And I just can't imagine how you found the kind of inner strength to do that. It must have, it's almost comedic. It's not funny, of course it's not. But, the idea of this new widow singing these nursery rhymes in a swimming pool. And how on earth did you do that?
It was like that, but it was also a distraction.
Yeah, of course.
And I think the other thing was I've been working from home long time before COVID, so I was freelance. So I spent a lot of my time in the house anyway. And then when he was here being ill, and I was still working. So going out to Water Babies actually really helped, because I wasn't here.
Yeah. And it just because it's a hot topic at the moment. What was the support like for you when you returned to work? Were you given a sort of staggered return? Were you given any support? I'm not going to ask you to criticise an organisation, because I don't know the answer to.
I had time off during that. When he was ill, they were very good at, if I had a last minute, they'd be really, really good to find me cover for my lessons. They knew obviously I had Marley, but then a lot of it happened during school holidays. So there was a whole block of summer where I wasn't teaching anyway. And then when he was in the hospice, they were really, really good, good.
That's really good to hear, because I'm doing some work in sort of how people return to work after bereavement, and you do get a very mixed response from the support offered. So, and one of the things that we kind of hear as a recurring theme actually is if the employee, for want of a better word, is kind of feels supported, it eases that transition so much. And it might just be knowing that you can have time off. You might not need it, but just the awareness that is there if you do. No, I know the answer to this, but talk to me about romantic entanglements. What does that look like for you now?
Well, now, it's weird when you're widowed. You think, and I don't know if this is a general thing. Oh, bugger! No one's going to want a widow. No one's going to want a widow with a kid. It's like
trauma. Try having 3.
Yeah. But you just didn't know. And, I spent many nights just sitting on the sofa thinking, oh, shall I go on internet dating? And that was it, because obviously COVID had happened. So, people weren't technically going out anymore. And I kept putting myself on these dating sites. And then within 2 hours, taking myself back. Because I thought, what am I doing? Why do this? No, blah. And then I thought, no, and then I'd leave it for a bit and then go back on. And then you'd get matched with these absolute weirdos. And I was like, no. And then I went on Match and I wrote the profile. And I wish I should have screenshot it. And I basically just said, I'm a widow. I'm going to put that out there. I'm a widow and I've got a child. And it was something like, if you don't like it, then you just move along. And yeah, you still get the weirdos, I have to say. I think everyone gets weirdos on internet dating. And then it was April of 2 years ago. I liked somebody and he liked me back. And then I think about a week later, I'd had a glass of wine and we swapped numbers and I rang him. And our first date was 2 years ago on Sunday. Oh, he's got 3 kids. He's divorced with 3 kids. So there's a big pile of us now. we're looking at houses and things like that. Obviously, that's not going to happen overnight, but yeah, it's. And he was like this morning when he said, "Oh, you've got your thing today. Good luck. It's going to be fine. I hope it's going to help," because I think he knows that there are some not anger issues. That makes me sound a bit psychopathic, but that hasn't been dealt with because of the way things turned out.
And because as well, we know ourselves, again, it's a recurring theme. Those feelings of anger and resentment sort of had to be locked away. And to a certain extent, they still do. You talk about having to restrain what you say in front of Marley. And actually, they do need an outlet, don't they? You have to be able to vocalise these feelings because otherwise they really do torment you.
Yeah, I think that is true. And I'm hoping that I've never spoken about it like this on any kind of platform, so I think it's probably going to help me a lot that I've got a lot of it out.
I think it will. And to be honest with you, Tash, I mean, I didn't know all of this. I think, as particularly, we tend to meet up and there's hordes of children rolling around, aren't there? So it's more, you kind of get snippets of conversation. So even for me to be able to sit opposite you, as it were, from our respective homes and sort of talk to you about your journey through grief and kind of how horrible it's been for you and how hard you've had to fight. And I suppose it is difficult when you're talking to somebody that you know sort of personally. And I talk about my hair's going up my arms and I'm all goosey everywhere because hearing you talk about it, it's difficult to listen to. It's even more difficult to live. But I've met Alan, your partner, and he's a really, really nice guy, and I'm really happy that you've met somebody that is bringing sort of light and happiness into your life. And Marley's obviously, really likes him, doesn't he? And he's got some new siblings. So
yeah, he loves it. And I think it's like a completely different relationship. There's no, I mean, I'm not saying it's a perfect relationship. There'll always be conflict. But I've never laughed so much in my life or smiled so much or it's brilliant. And I've never been in a relationship like that. There was always ups and downs with me and Rob. He was one of the laziest people I've ever met in my life. And I did everything, basically. I did everything and I paid for everything. And I think there's so much now that I'm like, well, I did that and I did that and I did that. And now I'm like, actually, I'm in a relationship where I'm not doing that. And it's taken a lot to kind of accept that there is relationships out there that are good and nice and it works.
Because obviously hearing you say there, that you were sort of the primary organizer and facilitator in your relationship, and now you've got somebody that wants to take care of you. Did you find it quite difficult to let him?
Yeah, it was really difficult. And even things like cooking dinner. I'm used to just cooking dinner on my own, and because it's what I'm used to doing. And now it's like, oh, we'll do it together. I'm like, what? What do you mean we've got to do it together? I can do it on my own, but we've both had to learn. I mean, I'm not going to get into his past relationship, but I know both of us have had to learn a lot of new ways around the house. I mean, we don't live together, but I'm usually there all weekend. And it is learning how to be around somebody. And when they say, oh, I'll get it, or do you want this, or oh, I'll help with that, going, okay, someone wants to help me. Yes, that'll be lovely. Thank you. And it is a completely different way of living a relationship, I have to say.
So I can relate to this a little bit. Ben was a very hands-on dad, so it's not sort of that side so much. But when I met John, I sort of got my head around managing 3 children and just doing everything and just head down, get on, power through. And then he would say things like, oh, do you want me to take Tabby to swing? Or, I'll pick the kids up from school. And I was like, oh, okay, but somebody is going to help me. And again, you find it quite difficult to surrender control. I suppose perhaps there's a fear that if you do and that support is taken away from you again, will you ever be able to do it by yourself? And I guess for you, there's the added, element of betrayal. So do you find yourself worried that Alan, or did you find yourself worried that Alan might hurt you in the same way?
Oh God, yeah. At the beginning, it took me such a long time to fully trust. Trust is the wrong word because but there was that. Well,
Maybe relax to be able to.
yeah.
Yeah.
And the amount of conversations, he was like, well, I'm not, stupid things like Christmas parties.
Yeah.
And this is going to sound ridiculous, but when I was with Rob, whenever I'd go to a Christmas party, he'd automatically be like, oh, who have you been talking to when I got home? And whenever he went out for his Christmas do or whatever, he'd never come home at what time he said he was going to come home at. Not, I wasn't on the phone all the time, he just never came home when he was supposed to come home. And the following day, I was like, oh, how was it? Nothing. So, and now I know why, obviously, but there was that trust element completely went. There was no trust there at all. And it was really difficult. I remember if it was last Christmas or a Christmas before, I can't remember. And Anthony was going out for his Christmas work day. And my stomach dropped.
Yeah.
It was like automatic reaction to me. It was like, well, that's it then, isn't it? And I had this conversation with, and it was really hard to say, well, I don't think you're going to do anything, but, maybe you will.
This kind of irrational part of my brain thinks she will, please reassure me, kind of thing.
It was, and I didn't, and it was a hard conversation to me have to say, look, I do trust you, but because my trust has been broken in the past,
Yeah.
there is that element in me. Not now, I don't have it at all now. But it took a long time for me to get that trust there.
And I think that's completely understandable because even you lost Rob first to cancer, and then you kind of lost him again subsequently when you found out about the secret life he was living. So it's completely understandable and probably expected that you would have some reservations about trusting somebody. But again, what a wonderful man that he kind of patiently has reassured you and enabled you to build your trust up. He hasn't just gone, oh, don't be so bloody stupid. And I think that's really shows a lot about his character too.
Yeah, I think that's true. And it was, it took me a long time to talk about it, I have to say. And because I just keep it in. I'm fine.
This is who you are, isn't it? You're very sort of, just bombastic. I can do this. I don't need anybody else. And I know that you have a vulnerable side, but I think many people wouldn't know this. And I'm glad that you have been able to sort of lower that mask that we all wear to function and showing Alan that you are vulnerable and that you do need caring for, and that he's been able to offer you that, because we really do. Everybody needs a bit of love, don't they?
We do need a bit.
Oh, Tash, I think unless you have anything else that you would like to talk about today, I think that is your story. And I think that you've told it really beautifully. And I know that it's been very difficult for you to talk about some of these things. And I felt a little bit guilty poking you to do so. But I also genuinely believe in the value of telling your story. This is not a profit-making podcast. So we don't do this for monetary gain. We do this to give people the opportunity to tell their stories and to give the wider audience a chance to listen and understand that not all grief is straightforward. Some of it's very, very complicated, and it can take a long time to process. And actually, we're allowed to be angry and we're allowed to be hurt. And it's okay to feel all these conflicting feelings. So I think what you've done today is very, very brave and very, very powerful. And I'm very, very proud of you for doing it. And I'm trying not to cry as I say this.
Thank you for being that support when it all happened. That I had you don't generally know people that have been through this at our age. And obviously, I know a friend of mine it happened to. And you're like, what? This shouldn't happen to people at our age. This shouldn't happen. And having you there to understand what I was going through, and also understand with the kids as well, because you never know how they're going to deal with it. You never know how to explain things to them. And you answered a lot of questions through that time because you'd been there.
I think I probably said it to you at the time that it's not something I wish I'd been through. Of course it's not. A million times over, I wish that my husband didn't die. But the only benefit that kind of came out of this is the ability to vocalize how it was for me and help other people maybe going through the same things. And it is it's shared wisdom, I guess, shared experience that you would normally find in older communities of people, because that tends to be when their partners die. And finding your tribe, finding a group of people that do understand, it really is, it's vital, actually, I think, in getting through it, if that's the right word, if surviving the initial onslaught of grief.
I think it is true, and talking helps. And I did feel a bit of a fraud coming on here, though, because I think a lot of people, like, I know when you talk about Ben and John talks about Sarah, there's still so much love there. And I do feel a bit of a fraud coming on here, because I'm like, no, there's no love there.
No, I disagree, actually. I think you're not a fraud. You are giving another voice. You're giving another dynamic to this very complex thing that is grief. And it's people are maybe a little afraid to say these things because they don't want to be thought of as speaking ill of the dead, or they don't want to be seen as negative. And actually, just because somebody has died, it doesn't make them a good person. And you were very hurt by the person you loved, and you are absolutely entitled to say that.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm pleased I've got it out, and I hope if there's other people that listen that feel they don't need to, like you said, put on that mask, pretend everything was rosy and lovely and a perfect life, and they have to grieve and be sad. It's not always like that.
Yeah.
And I can't pretend that that's what it was, and I'm not going to pretend. And if people don't like it, then they don't like it. But I think that's what's taught me this as well, or what I've learned from this, is that you just completely be yourself with dealing with it. And grief is weird. Everyone deals with it in very, very different ways. So people shouldn't apologise if they feel they're not grieving the way everybody thinks they should.
Yeah, I completely agree. There is no correct way to grieve, and it's a real societal perception of what it looks like and how we should behave and how we should feel. And I think this podcast is one of the ways in which we're kind of blowing open the narrative around it and showing that we are complex human beings. Even though we're widows, we have, we still have other feelings other than sadness.
Yeah.
So I genuinely, as I said earlier, I genuinely think that what you've done here is a huge service to the widow community and further. So thank you very much for being so very, very brave. And I want to give you a cuddle, really. I would win for this one. I'll
have to come down.
Yeah, you must. So thank you, Tash, for being such an eloquent and beautiful guest today. I'm very, very grateful. And for our listeners, if you've been touched by any of the issues in this and you want to reach out, please do. You know where we are, and I'm sure Tash wouldn't mind if I even forwarded on messages if you wanted to send anything. But for now, take care of yourselves, and Don and I will be back on Friday to talk about Tash's episode. Thank you for listening.